what's up everybody? Welcome to Kimmel's Irish Pub and happy 2020. Happy New Year to everybody and Merry Christmas for those of you who I haven't seen in a while. I haven't done a fantasy football discussion since the end of the season, the actual end of the fantasy season, which is normally around 16. But now week 17 is over, we're headed into the NFL playoffs, so I figured let's talk a little bit about our fantasy season. So I want to start off by telling you little credentials, a little bit about myself. So this year, 4 leagues. In 4 leagues, won 2 of them. And in the other one, I came in 3rd. And then there was 1 league where I didn't even make the playoffs. But, you know, not too bad. Out of 4 leagues, winning 2, coming in 3rd in the other one, was ranked 2nd in that one, lost in the semifinals, and came in 3rd. That's okay. And the other one, I didn't make the playoffs, but that's like a touchdown-heavy league, so a lot of luck's involved in that one, and I just didn't get lucky in that one. So that's, you know, so hopefully now maybe you're buying into the channel a little bit more when you see what I can do in 1 year. No, just a lot of it's luck. I mean, but anyway, let's talk about winners and losers at the top 3 positions. That's what I thought we'd talk about here today, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So let's start with quarterback. Who was the biggest winner at quarterback? Now, you can't come out and say Lamar Jackson. I think there were some people who believed in Lamar Jackson, and I think he could do it. So I'm not going to pick him, although he might be a good choice for a lot of people. For me, Jameis Winston. Now, a little biased there. I rode him to 2 championships this year, and my thought was going into it was load up on running backs and receivers and wait for quarterbacks and tight ends. And I did. I waited on Jameis Winston. Now, instead of taking Dak Prescott to back him up, I took up Cam Newton, so I messed that piece up. But again, for me, Jameis Winston, I thought he had a pretty good year. Points-wise, he had a stellar year. Throws a lot of interceptions, so that's the problem with him. But Arians, he gets it out there. So I think that was a good surprise. Wait a long time, you can land Jameis Winston. And I think the biggest bust at quarterback, Baker Mayfield. A lot of people jumped on him early. We thought he was going to turn it around. He has all the weapons in the world, and he was a big flop. So I would say Baker Mayfield is the biggest bust at quarterback. Again, in my thoughts. How about running backs? Running backs, this one's pretty interesting. I'm trying to think like who's the biggest bust, and it's hard when you have injuries or holdouts or things like that. You know, so without injuries included, although this one, mine has a little bit of an injury, but I don't think that matters. You could look at Le'Veon Bell, I think, but I think people were leery of him going to the Jets, right? So for me, David Johnson. David Johnson was the biggest bust. I really expected him to turn things around this season and really, you know, come back after last year and just be awesome. And yes, he got dinged up a little bit and lost his starting job, and it's like, wow, he's a backup running back now. So I don't know, we'll see what happens with him, but for me, he's one of those big names that I think is one of the biggest busts. And again, I'm sure there's other ones out there, but he rises to the top for me. And then the exact opposite, who's the biggest surprise? Kenyon Drake. Right? I mean, he comes over from Miami and steals the show. Takes over DJ's job in Arizona. So I think that's pretty awesome. And he ended up with a pretty good year. We'll see what happens next year with those 2. I think it's interesting that I picked those 2, both from the Cardinals. 1 up, 1 down. But, hey, there you go. That's why I'm picking up running back. At receiver, okay? So the biggest surprise to me, maybe not to a lot of you again, is Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin was, when I was going through my pre-draft analysis, and it kept saying take him, and I kept skipping him. I'm like, I'm not taking Chris Godwin because Evans is there, Mike Evans is there, you know, and I don't like, you know, having 2 at each spot, right? But there you have it. I mean, he went nuts again with the Jameis Winston, Arians, the whole 9 yards, and I'm upset because I skipped over him, so I'm going to give him the award of the biggest surprise for me at receiver. Biggest bust, okay? So I would normally say Odell Beckham Jr. because I owned him in one of my leagues, the league that I didn't make the playoffs, of course. So I think he was a big bust. But another one, and it's hard for me to say this because I didn't like him coming into the season. I didn't want to know part of him. I didn't believe in him, and he kind of bust. Now, injuries to quarterback cause this as well, and that's Juju Smith-Schuster. You know, so for me, I think he was the biggest bust. We'll see what happens if he gets Roethlisberger back next year. So that's who I'm rating. Odell Beckham is a biased choice for me, but Juju Smith-Schuster I think is a bigger bust in my eyes. And then let's go to tight end. One more position we'll talk about. I won't get into defenses or kickers or anything like that, but I think the biggest surprise to to me. I mean, you got Kelsey, you got everybody out there, right? My biggest surprise, again, was Mark Andrews. He was a big surprise to me. And a little insight here. Now, you heard I won 2 championships and came in 3rd in another league, got a 3 thing. So I know a little bit. I'll be honest with you. When somebody said, we're going to take Mark Andrews, I had to look it up. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know who he was on draft day. I was like, oh, okay, he's tight end for the Ravens. That's cool. Didn't even know about him, didn't have him on my radar at all. So he was a big surprise by me, and tip my hats to those of you who drafted him and rode him into the playoffs or into your fantasy league. Not for those of you who picked him up or anything like that, but people knew about him and I didn't, and that was a nice win for you guys. Biggest bust, I think, is O.J. Howard. You know, I think a lot of people expected a lot from him this year. He had promising statistics coming in. Everybody thought he was going to blow up, and he was the biggest bust to me. I can't think of anybody else. In the same regard, that was the other, we'll top it off of both. I told you what I did with Winston and waited to the end. Same thing with tight ends. I waited until everybody else had their tight end, and then I went and picked mine. And that tight end at that time was Hunter Henry. Okay, that's who I chose, which he ended up having a pretty decent year, except for when he got hurt a little bit there. But then I immediately, in the next round or the round after that, went with Austin Hooper. How about that? That was just luck of the draw. I was just like, okay, I'm going to get one. I'm going to take the tail end of the top 10 or, you know, the top 6 or what it was, and then back it up right away. So a little strategy for me, again, loading up on the backs and the receivers throughout the draft and just waiting on quarterback and tight end. It happened to work in at least a couple of my leagues. So there you go. That's what I got for you. There's my biggest bust and my biggest surprises, I guess, from me. Love to hear what your thoughts were, how your season was. Now comes the low part. I know a lot of people play fantasy football playoffs. I can't do that. I don't. It's hard. It's easy to pick the players, but you don't know who's going to play as many games, all that kind of stuff. But you know, now we're going to start thinking about keepers, free agencies, and everything like that. So if you haven't seen my videos on that and how we run free agency and how we name keepers, that's kind of fun. Keeps people engaged throughout the off season. But that's what we're headed for right now. The lull of the off season. Don't go to sleep. Just because fantasy football is over does not mean you should stop studying it. Keep playing. Keep trading. Send me offers. All right. That's all I got for you. Thanks for tuning in. Kimmel's Irish Pub.